That is a tough act to follow. Let me tell you what. I can't tell you how grateful I am to Charlie for warming the crowd up for me, but no, it's fantastic. I'm really honored to have the chance to do a breakout today. My name's Matt Brainerd. I'd say about 8 years ago, I started on the campaign of a guy who nobody gave any chance. They were covering on the entertainment pages. I was given a lot of responsibility. I was in charge of strategy and ran all the field offices across the country. And I'm very glad that that individual turned out to be the very best president in our country's history. And in all likelihood, I believe, back in the White House. Do you think he's got a good chance? Do you think he's going to come back in? All right, so listen. Today's lecture is probably going to be, and I use the word lecture, right? This breakout session. It's going to be a little bit different than I think a lot of the content. This is very dense material. And the one thing I am confident of is that when we're done today, you'll have at least learned something. I only have about 45 minutes. I'd love to do Q&A, but I'm going to motor through it pretty quickly. But again, this is recorded, so you'll be able to watch it later if you missed anything. And I'd be really grateful to even if we get kicked out of here to take questions afterwards. I'm here for the rest of the conference, okay? So let's see if this thing works. Awesome. So registration and turnout. Beating the left at their own game. This is an area where the left has been kicking the right's butt for longer than I've been alive, right? And we're going to talk about how and why and how we can fix this and how we can overcome the disadvantage, because I actually believe that we're naturally better at these things than the left are, okay? So first, I got to plug something. January 6, 2024, we'll be leading a protest in front of the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. You're all invited to come. Look, we have been leading on the Justice for J6 movement for a long time, since basically January of 2021. And we've held 70 rallies all across the country. Nobody's ever been arrested at any of our events. Nobody's been harassed. Nothing bad has ever happened. We'll have a lawyer present because, may need something like that, but we never have before. So I would encourage, if you can come to DC on January 6th to raise your voice on behalf of the people who have been politically persecuted, not for what they did, but because of what they believe, we'd welcome you, okay? So hopefully some of you guys can make it. All right. So in 2022, a very generous businessman in Arizona named Jim Lehman wanted to sponsor our organization, Look Ahead America, to do voter registration in the state. Who here has heard of Jim Lehman? He's a good guy. He's a good man. And he said, look, we want to do a better job registering voters here in Arizona for the patriotic right, okay? Look Ahead America is a 501c3, and you'll hear a lot more about that later. We don't support candidates or parties, but we do have an ideology and we do have a constituency. And our constituency are disaffected patriots of rural and blue-collar background. Has anybody here read J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy? That's exactly the demographic, the constituency that we're targeting and we advocate for. So Jim said, look, we got to get more people registered. Let's get the program going. He funded it. And I want to share some lessons that we learned from it. The first is there's a false dichotomy here, because one of the things we get very excited about on our side is doing voter registration, right? Who here has registered a voter or tried to register a voter, right? Our way historically, and this is the way I originally looked at before I learned, is that we look at registered versus non-registered. And the problem is that that's not a really good way of distinguishing between the people we need to target and how we need to target them. Because there's actually some nuance among the people who are not registered. They have very different reasons for not being registered. And there's a difference between the incidentally unregistered and the determined non-voters. Now, incidentally unregistered, those are individuals who maybe they voted before, or they voted where they used to live, but they've moved to a new place and they just happen to not be registered. But they mean to vote. They like to vote. They're of a culture of voting. They just haven't gotten the paperwork done, right? And when you do your table outside a gas station or some other means to reach out to these people, it's pretty quick and it's pretty easy. But the question really is that how much of a difference does registering that person make? And we, through our own research, shows that at best, you may have gotten them to vote in one election that they wouldn't have otherwise, right? Because usually what happens with these itinerant folks, they just moved to Arizona. It's a great place to move. I know a lot of people are moving here. I'm sure a lot of you moved here because of the great weather and wonderful climate. You had to register when you got here, but maybe you missed an election. Maybe you missed a primary and municipal election, right? So these are the incidentally unregistered, and by targeting them and registering them, you're getting them maybe one extra election that they wouldn't have voted in. Because what happens is when they miss an election, they say, oh, shoot, got to go take care of it. Or just by getting a driver's license in this state and almost every other state, you're registered to vote, or you're automatically registered to vote. You don't even have to check the boxes. Sometimes, some states, it's automatically checked, okay? Now, that's basically, here's a good strategy, and this is something that Look Ahead America can help you with if you're trying to do a voter registration drive and you want to target incidentally unregistered. This is what we did in Arizona. We registered between 20 and 25,000 new patriotic voters in this state. But the easiest way for us to do it, the most cost-effective, is we were able to determine when somebody, a patriot, a conservative from someplace else in the country moves into Arizona, we send them a letter prompting them. And we give them a phone call and a text message, right? Very cost effective. And others before us have also tried to do voter registration, and they find that basically prompting somebody by a mail piece is really cost effective compared to all the other means, which is, door knocking, which is extremely expensive, or some kind of broadcast that isn't specifically targeting people. But the problem is that this really only works on the incidentally unregistered. So let's talk about the other people, the non-voters. You've got so many beautiful young people here at Turning Point, so many telegenic, energetic young people. And when a telegenic, photogenic, energetic young lady at a gas station catches some guy walking out of there, and he's not registered to vote, and she goes up with a big smile and says, hi, sir, how are you doing today? I hope you're having a blessed day. Love to register you to vote today. It'll just take a couple of minutes. He's going to sign the form. He's going to fill it out, right? How can you say no to that? And the girl, she's elated, right? She got to sign up. It's like help saving the country. But here's the problem with that. This is for the determined. And he was not registered because he didn't care to be registered. He did not want to be registered. And the problem with that is the moment he walks away from her, he's exactly the same person he was before he filled out the form. So the real distinction, the real dichotomy is really not between those that are registered to vote and those that are not registered to vote, but those that do vote, and some of them may be incidentally unregistered, and we can help them with that, and you can help them with that, and the people who are determined not to vote. Now, why are they determined not to vote? It's because they're of a culture that doesn't vote. They're disconnected. I vote, I believe, because I grew up in a family where at the kitchen table we talked politics. We watched the news together. Both my parents were voters. They argued sometimes over who they're going to vote with. Most of us come from this culture of voting. And if any of you did, and I know a lot of you have read Hillbilly Elegy, there's a scene in the book where this attorney, he had gone to law school, but he had come from the sticks, right? J.D. Vance from the sticks of Ohio, and he's going to this fancy dinner where they're trying to decide who they want to bring in as a summer associate at a law firm, right? And he's sitting down at the table, and he's seeing something he's never seen before, right? He sees two forks. It's like, what's going on here? Why are there two forks? And he's terrified of that, and he has to go out and call a friend and say, hey, there's two forks at the table. What's this about? I've never seen this. Because he wasn't from a culture where you had a salad fork, right? In the same way, many of the people that we're trying to reach, disaffected patriotic Americans of rural and blue-collar backgrounds, they're not of a culture of voting. And the efforts to bring them into a culture of voting go beyond just getting them to fill out a form. So we understand there is a distinction. So it's important to remember that if you register a new voter, that cannot be the end of your relationship with them. It has to be the beginning of it. And it requires constant follow-up to bringing them into the culture of voting, to put our arms around them, encourage them, and give them incentive to vote, and to be part of whatever you're building in your community where you are as part of that voter registration effort. So the better way to look at it really is not registered versus unregistered, but the propensity of somebody to vote. And I like to break that into three different categories. We have high propensity, most of the people in this room, I think, right? You vote in every election. Then there's the mid-propensity where maybe you just vote in the presidentials, maybe you don't vote in primaries, you just don't get around to it. It's not a huge huge priority for you. And then there's like the people who just don't vote, or maybe they voted once a long time ago and they're just out of it, okay? And each of them kind of requires and should have a different strategy for you targeting them if you're part of a campaign or a party or a nonprofit like us trying to turn people out to vote. The high propensity people, we really need to encourage them to vote as early as possible, by mail, early in person, and I'll talk about why. It's very important, and because we're not doing that, we are at a huge disadvantage, one that many of you probably aren't even aware of and that is never reported on the news. Mid-propensity, hey, sometimes I vote, sometimes I don't. I know how to vote. I know where my precinct is. I know how to fill out the form, etc. It's really about getting these people to vote as easily as possible. And for most people, and we've got experience with this, the easiest way is basically vote by mail. And I know that in Arizona and most of the other parts of the country, you can sign up for permanent absentee. Or, that's the case in Virginia. We'll talk about that later. And the thing is that once you've signed up and you've voted once, you have about an 80% recidivism rate. So that's a good way of turning somebody who's a mid-propensity voter to somebody who's a high-propensity voter, all right? But then we get the low propensity, and that's kind of the area that Look Ahead has been targeting and that our projects moving into 2024 are targeting. And we're going to talk about our strategies for them because we did a program in Virginia. I'll talk about that soon. So listen, this is kind of controversial. I had a really long 2-hour debate with Mike Lindell about this on Tim Pool's show. I don't know if you saw it. I would maybe just watch the first hour. You don't need to get in the second. It just gets more painful from there. But look, election day voting, which is something that many of our side have encouraged, is a disaster, a catastrophe. Now, part of the reason, there's 2 reasons you're all probably aware of. Is number 1 is that, hey, sometimes you just forget. If you're planning to, and you're waiting until the last day, we all know stuff comes up, kid gets sick, double shift at work, car breaks down, bad weather, all these kinds of reasons. And those are very real because, if you do a poll of people and ahead of an election say, hey, how likely are you to vote? They're going to say, yeah, I'm absolutely certain. If you go back, because we've done this, you see that drops off precipitously. So a lot of people say they're going to vote, they intend to, but it just doesn't happen. So would you rather have 1 day of opportunity for voting or, like we have in Virginia, 45 days? Now, I'm not advocating for 45 days of voting. I'm just saying that's the reality. And I don't think we want to let our opponents have a 45-day head start on us or 30-day or however long it is in the state you're in over us because we're just saying, we're all going to wait until election day and if something happens. The second reason is that sometimes the election system, there's suspicions about why it happens, but we had a big problem here in Maricopa, didn't we, on election day? And incompetence, intentional. The bottom line is that the people who didn't have any problem getting their votes cast and counted were the ones who voted by mail. There was no problems with that. It was all received. You could see it online. It was counted, etc. It was the people who were voting election day. Guess what? They screwed up. They ran out of paper. The scanners weren't working right. The printers weren't working right. It's a very complicated process, but if you're able to do it by mail, you avoid the problem. But here's really the big catastrophe, okay? And look, I've run Look Ahead America for the last few years. But what I do, I really don't make much money from doing it, but what I do for a living is I'm a political consultant from Washington, D.C. It's terrible, right? It's the worst thing you can be, honestly. Yeah, I'm a political consultant from D.C. You're responsible for all the problems. But I can say that in the 2022 election, the campaigns I was running, I had at my fingertips, the hardest thing in the campaign, again, you don't read a lot about this, is the budgeting, okay? And I think I spent about $8 million in the 2022 campaign. Not a whole lot, but a significant amount across multiple campaigns. And when you vote, we know you voted. So if you vote early, we don't have to communicate with you anymore. We don't have to send door knockers, text messages, live calls, robocalls, and by far the most expensive thing, direct mail to you anymore. We can just say, and then we can focus our resources on who's left. Now, the left, they already have a financial advantage over us, and pretty much all across the country. They outraise us. They've got the George Soroses and the other people of his ilk. We have some good donors on our site, some big dollar donors, but it does not match what the left has. So we're already at a financial disadvantage. Now, come election day, all of the dedicated leftists vote right away. And guess what that does to the universe that the left has to target? It shrinks it. That means they can spend more dollars per voter remaining to try to convince them. Whereas our guys, we say, we're just voting on election day. That's the plan. We're game day voters. What do you think that does to our ability to spend money? I have to, in the last day, I had to send a massive piece of mail that was extremely expensive that basically put one of my campaigns in the red. Left didn't have to do that. They put all their attention on that tiny little bit of the people that they could persuade or their folks that maybe have a hard time voting, disabled, et cetera, getting them to the polls. So when you vote early, you're effectively making, in 2024, I'm not kidding, a several $100 contribution to whoever you're supporting. Up and down the ballot. It's basically if you vote on the very first day and you don't wait, the amount of money that you save the campaign that they can redirect to other people is massive. And look, I know there's a lot of hesitation on this, and I don't think you're going to find a better expert on election integrity and voter fraud and that kind of stuff than me. That's another lecture. But I promise you, that's probably the best thing you can do to help the candidates you support win. So let's talk about that a little bit, okay? Now, look at America's nonprofit, nonpartisan. We don't support candidates or parties, but this is just factual, okay? Arizona, these are the voting margins that candidates lost by. Carrie Lake lost by 17,000, Blake by 125, Fincham 120, Abe had 280 by last count. The number of Republicans who did not show up to vote, 408,000. And the red dots on the map actually represent them. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, coworkers. They just didn't vote. They didn't vote. They didn't get pushed to vote. They didn't get pressured. They didn't get targeted enough. They didn't show up. Let's look at another race. This is Georgia. Herschel Walker in the runoff lost by 100,000. Absent Republicans, 575,000. They just didn't show up. And most of them had voted at least once in their history, right? But they weren't part of the culture of high propensity. They didn't get somebody reaching out to them, giving the extra push. Maybe they didn't get that extra push because the Walker campaign was spending all of its money on all the people that are only voting on Election Day, so they couldn't concentrate spending on just this audience that really needed that extra push. Nevada, neighboring state, Adam Laxalt, lost by less than 8,000 votes. The number of absent Republicans, 200,000. 200,000, that's like many, many, many multiples. And this is one that's kind of close and personal to me. This is Joe Kent in Washington's 3rd District. He lost by less than a percentage point. 2,600 votes, absent Republicans about 100,000. And this is a state where you're allowed to do ballot harvesting. And where you're allowed to do ballot harvesting, I know you're not allowed to do it in Arizona, but in other places, it makes a difference. And hold on, let me correct myself. I know ballot harvesting triggers people, that phrase, so I'm not going to use it anymore. I encourage you not to use it anymore because when they say it, sometimes it entails illegal activities, right? Or they think it does. So what I say, and we all are going to say, is legal ballot collections, okay? I swear to God, I went to this old woman's house. She lived in a trailer. I door knock every campaign. I door knocked 5,000 doors last cycle. She said she hadn't seen her ballot. I said, well, it's probably in your mailbox. You want me to go get it for you? I can go get it for you. I go, her mailbox is chock full. It's stuffed. Because no, it's not. I mean, I guess it's funny, but she couldn't do it because she had a bad leg. Getting out of the trailer on the steps, she has to have somebody come get her mail for her. I came, I got the mail, I fished the ballot. I said, here you go, ma'am. Would you like me to return this for you? It's legal here. She said, sure. So she sat there. There's no way she would have cast that ballot had somebody like me not been there to make that effort. And that's what you see in all these red dots and all these massive number of people who did not show up and vote, and you saw who would likely be their candidate of choice go down in flames, and the left doesn't have this problem. I'm going to talk about this a little bit because, one thing we're really good at doing on the right is whining and complaining and going on Fox News and going on podcasts saying, oh, this is all terrible. These horrible things are happening. Can you believe what the left is doing? This is a headline from the Wall Street Journal. Democrats charity voter registration scheme. What they're complaining about in this article is they're saying Democrats are using 501c3 organizations for voter registration as well as voter turnout. Big problem, big problem. Oh, here's another one, just the news, but this is a bigger story. Congress and Republicans in Congress are probing whether Democrats improperly using nonprofits and foreign money to win elections. More complaining. Oh, we're going to hold a committee. We're going to hold a hearing on this. We're going to hold a hearing on it. My friends, I'm tired of losing. It's time to get in the game. And that's what Look Ahead America is doing. Are you ready to get in the game? So let's talk about why it's smarter to do voter turnout and registration using a 501c3. Now we're talking a little bit of tax code, okay? So forgive me if it gets a little technical or it's a little dense, but I'm going to break it down. I know you're really smart people because you're here, right? So I think all of you understand this. Some of you know some of this already. The first is that contributions are completely tax deductible. You give money to a candidate or a local party or a PAC, it's not tax deductible, not at all. And that also allows that C3s can take contributions for foundations. In fact, most of the money that Look Ahead America has raised has come from foundations. They can only give to C3s. They can't give to campaigns or anything else like that. Another advantage is that anyone can donate. Anyone can donate. Anyone. A corporation, a non-citizen, a oil tycoon in Ukraine can donate. And not only can he donate, what's the limit to get that you can, what's the most amount of money you can give to like a candidate for office here, a federal candidate? It's technically primary generals, $3,300 each, $6,600 total, right? No limits. No limits. And this may be the best part, no disclosure. Now, I know everybody here is probably given some contribution off of WinRed, right? Guess what happens to your email address? It's done. It's done. It's gone. It's gone. And you also show up on a federal report. The campaigns have to put out a report every quarter, and more frequently closer to elections, reporting every single donor, their name, and how much they gave, who your employer is, what your occupation is, where you live, all that stuff. I don't have to tell. Nobody knows who the donors to Look Ahead America are except me. So a oil corporation in Ukraine could write a $10 million check to do voter turnout of a targeted demographic. And the left, who do they target? Women, minorities, college students, Rock the Vote. You've all heard that. Those are their voter turnout organizations. Or people who live in urban areas, the urban oppressed, can write a $10 million check to turn those people out. No limits. You never find out about it. And, there's actually one other advantage, too. And this is an advantage that Look Ahead America has, where we say to our donors, if you want to help us do voter turnout and voter registration, you get to pick the geography. So if you want to earmark this to a congressional district, a state legislative district, a zip code, a county, you can. In fact, we already have on our books donors who want to say, hey, I want to turn out disaffected patriotic Americans of rural and blue-collar backgrounds here. So that allows that kind of flexibility, and this is the flexibility the left has had for a very long time that Look Ahead America is finally bringing. Other advantages, low costs, and we can partnership with other C3s. Churches are very hesitant sometimes to bring a candidate there or to do anything with a political party, but we can, because we're a C3 just like them. We can go in the church, register every single person, tell them to go vote. We've been doing that in Georgia for a while very successfully. And I want to emphasize low cost, too, is that a first-class stamp on a postcard is about 50 cents for 6.5 by 11. 50 cents for a campaign. They can use red tag mail, which brings it down to 28 cents. For us, we get to use nonprofit mail to tell people to go vote. 14 cents. That is a massive, massive savings. And we get all kinds of other fees waived, facility fees waived, all that kind of stuff. Why? I mean, we buy T-shirts for our volunteers. We don't have to pay a sales tax, right? These are all the ways why C3s are the right way to do this. I'm going to talk about our experience. Oh, and there's one other thing. This is very cool, and you'll hear more about this later, is that we can use high-pressure tactics. These people who are not voting, they're a problem. And sometimes to get them motivated to vote, we have to muscle them a little bit, okay? I'm not ashamed to say what we did in Virginia, you'll see shortly, it made a lot of people very angry. Very angry. It made the Attorney General extremely angry. But I don't care. Who are you going to get angry at? Matt Brainerd? I don't care. If a candidate did something like this, there would be blowback. People would say, I'm not voting for this guy. Can you see what he sent me? I'm not voting for this party. You see this? What's this? It's very offensive. I'm intimidated. We don't have a problem with that. So we have a lot more flexibility in what we can do and say to voters that others can't. And those are all the advantages of a C3. And we got to bring all those things to bear in Virginia, the 2023 election. We had one very brave donor made a substantial contribution so that we were able to do a test project in Virginia like we'd never been able to do before. And look, our organization is called Look Ahead America, but look, that's a weird name, right? What does that even mean? So we created a new brand in Virginia called Virginia Voter Assistance. Oh, that's cool. Oh, Virginia Voter Assistance. It sounds almost like a government agency. It's not. But is nothing more innocuous than an organization called Arizona Voter Assistance? Oh, they seem neutral. I guess they're just helping people vote, right? And this is our team. They all had little ID badges. They all got officially trained by the state of Virginia. They had scooters, so they could go hit doors much more quickly. They're just trying to help people vote. They're very friendly and very innocuous. Our targets were mid to low propensity voters. So we really wanted to reach people who we did not think was going to vote in the 2023 elections because, in Virginia, we vote every year. It's a circus. And 2023 is special because it's the lowest turnout historically, and it turned out to be around 37% because the other years you have president, and then you have governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and then you have the federal year where you have senators or members of Congress, and then you have this last one, which is just some municipals and state legislative. So it's very low. So we had a lot of targets of people we were able to model that were disaffected patriotic Americans, but who we did not expect to vote based on their history, right? They didn't vote in the last governor's race or they missed several elections in a row. We didn't target anybody who had no history of voting because we had a limited budget, and that's a big lift, right? They just voted they were registered by accident when they got their driver's license, or this is also the case if you ever try to identify people who've never voted before, they're probably still on the roll because the state hasn't done a good job taking them off. We've seen that all over the place, and it's actually a vector for voter fraud. But so that's who we targeted, and we hit these people with 7 different points of contact. Okay? 7 points of contact. They got direct mail, they got door knocking, they got MMS text messages, they got live phone calls, they got robocalls, they got digital targeting, and one of my favorites, postcards, right? Now, y'all get, around election time, your boxes are filled with garbage, spam mail, but right, nobody throws out a personal handwritten postcard from someplace far away. We have a big activist space at Look Ahead America, and we encouraged our people to, hey, come to our website, and we'll give you 10 addresses of people who are not likely to vote. Send them a nice, loving postcard from showing off how beautiful your part of the world is, encouraging them to vote. Is that nice? Because you're not going to throw that away. You at least read it, and we're grateful that we had so many people that helped us with that. We sent, I think we sent at least 1 postcard for every voter that we were targeting, which is good. And also, we set up inbound email, texting, and phone help because all of our contacts had our information on it. So, hey, if you need help. And I can't tell you how many times our targets who were in nursing homes, we sent somebody from our door team to go to a nursing home and get all those people signed up for permanent absentee ballots. I can't tell you how many elderly folks called our phone line and wanted us to walk them through the process. So, again, what was our call to action to these people? When it was allowed, we did absentee request forms. So, in Arizona, you actually, you're not allowed to ballot harvest, in part thanks to this guy, Don Shooter, here back in the corner, his former state legislator. But one thing you can harvest is absentee ballot request forms. So we went through Virginia before the ballots had dropped saying, hey, fill out this form and you'll get your ballot on it. And we could get those filled out and we could turn them in to the local elections office. So that's one way that you can semi-harvest in Arizona or a state where you face restrictions, because usually there are no restrictions on that process. But in Virginia, we actually are allowed to do ballot collection. So again, legal ballot collection. In places where you can't do it, you can harvest those forms and turn them in on people's behalf. So that's really what we were doing. We were trying to get people signed up for permanent absentee, and then in that period where you couldn't do it anymore, we were trying to get people to vote early in person, and then on election day we were saying, hey, go vote, this is your location. So let's talk a little bit about our message mix. This was a mix of friendly messages and fierce messages. Our people who were on the doors, when they knocked, they were the most polite people, friendly people you've ever met, very encouraging. We actually had rebuttals when people said, oh, I don't want to fill out that form, I don't want to get an early ballot. We said, well, what's the reason? And we engaged with them. And when we tried to encourage them, the most effective argument we could make to them was that if you vote, people will stop knocking on your door. And we tracked that because we recorded which message moved people the most. That was by far, I think, way ahead of everything else. We also made the arguments, like in Virginia, people said, well, I don't know if my vote's going to be stolen. In Virginia, we were able to make a very good argument in that the elections office in every county in Virginia are run by Republicans. And that's because every county's election board has 3 members, a Republican, a Democrat, and somebody appointed by the governor. So when you have the governorship, that was a good way of moving people in favor of voting. We also talked about the fact that the local organizations and parties have done a good job securing the elections in Virginia. It's a fairly clean state, I think, compared to most. But by and large, like, hey, you're tired of people knocking on your door, tired of getting mail, tired of getting calls. That all stops once you vote. It's very effective. So, but we also had some fierce messaging. Oh, this is one of the memes we were sharing on social media because we were looking for people to sign up to send postcards, right? And we sent some beautiful postcards collection. We got some from all over the world. There's some from Latvia, some from Las Vegas, San Francisco. I think that's Mississippi or Missouri. And people would share them with us. We'd share them on social media. It's very fun, encouraging, right? So that's the carrot. Let's talk about the stick. This is a mail piece we sent out. This is one side of the mail piece, and it's very friendly, okay? We talk about option 1, request an absentee ballot online. We have a link for that. QR code. Option 2, vote early in person. Information on how to do that. Option 3, election day voting. Isn't that cool? Very easy. You know, right? Really friendly, technical. But this is what the other side of the mail piece said. Warning from Virginia voter assistance. According to government records, 1 or more residents at this address has failed to vote in recent elections. Failure to vote may result in a loss of Social Security income, Medicare eligibility, unemployment benefits, child tax credits, and child custody rights, concealed carry permit. Failure to vote may also result in the seizure of personal assets, including but not limited to firearms, bank accounts, cars, and real estate. See the reverse side for steps you can take to cast your ballot in the upcoming election. Deadline for response is pending. Now, this is all factually true. I go to bed at night sleeping like a baby because I know all of this is true, and it's true in 2 ways. First of all of these things are things that are happening right now in the country or in Virginia. The last part you might scratch your head a little bit about, but if you look at the asset forfeiture laws in Virginia, they can take all of your stuff for a crime they could never meet a standard to convict you of. So you commit a crime, they can't convict you of the crime, they don't have enough evidence, maybe you didn't do it. But they have a much lower standard to take all your stuff that may have been associated with it. And you know what's going on with child custody rights. You deny your child's gender in a school in California or Washington State, take your kid away. So if you don't vote, people who oppose what you stand for, your priorities, what matters to you, get elected. But there's another more insidious problem that makes all of this true. Nobody can tell me that during the Jim Crow era in this country, when blacks were not allowed to vote, that as a class, their rights and priorities and what mattered to them were completely ignored and run over and abrogated by the ruling class. An entire group of people cannot vote, were not allowed to vote. Their rights didn't matter anymore. They were forfeit until they restored that right to vote. The targeted demographic for this, disaffected patriotic Americans of rural and blue-collar backgrounds, is exactly the same, except it's even worse. Whereas blacks in this country were legally prevented from voting, these people are choosing not to. That's so much, it's a sickness. A sickness we're trying to cure. Now, some people disagreed with this tactic. One of them was the Attorney General. So I wake up one day and I've got reporters calling me because apparently he's issued a cease and desist order, saying that we're spreading misinformation. And we tried fighting him in court. We actually don't have the money to do that. It's too expensive. But I believe this was, and I also think it's a violation of the First Amendment right for them to tell us that we can't communicate with voters. This is the most protected First Amendment right. And all of his arguments were bull. Turning Point is a family event, okay? And he also lied in his court filings. So, but I don't know if we'll ever get that settled. And by the way, that message, that wasn't just a message that went in the mail. We also left that hanging on people's doors for all their neighbors to see. Now, fortunately, when the cease and desist landed, the mail piece had already gone out. The text message had gone out. We had covered almost all the doors. And, well, do you think that the left would stop? Yeah, I didn't either. So we sent out our next mail piece. Here we go, F, and this is also the door hanger. According to publicly available records from the Virginia Elections Department, while many voters in this neighborhood regularly vote and have an A voter grade from Virginia Voter Assistance, 1 or more residents in this house has failed to vote in recent elections, thus earning an F grade. Now, raise your hand if you think that these 2 mail pieces and door knockers and text messages are harsh. Do you think they're harsh? A little harsh? How many of you would not be comfortable leaving this on somebody's door? Raise your hand if you would not be comfortable. Okay. We targeted 28,000 voters. We got a 50% conversion rate. So I know some folks raise their hands, but let me ask, does anybody here in the room think that the left would hesitate to send out a mail piece like that or a door hanger if they thought it would help them win? Like I said, I'm tired of losing, and this is how we get in the game. So fundamentally, voter registration, voter turnout efforts, what they are at their heart is community organizing. And that's what Look Ahead America was created to do, community organizing. If you look at the battles that we've lost on the local level, CRT, school board battles, wokeism, the state level with election integrity laws, with them changing the way we're allowed to vote that makes it easier to cheat, raises questions, or even at the national level, if you look what's happening to our J6 political prisoners. Every single one of those problems can be traced back to our failure to match the left in the field of community organizing, and that's what we want to help you with. We have a free beginner community organizer training session coming up later this month, or later in January, actually. We'd encourage all of you to register and sign up for it. It's completely free. It's just 3 hours on one evening, and it goes by really quickly. And it's a good chance for you to learn about what you can do at your local level to make a difference. Now, I know that in the big room, they talk a lot about national issues, right? Big stuff, momentous things. And from where we're sitting, and even me, I'm just looking at it, think, man, some of those fights they want to pick, some of those changes they want to bring, they're so far away from me. They're so far away from my ability to really do very much about them other than maybe vote and throw a few dollars, right? The fights that you can pick and win are the ones that are happening in your neighborhood, in your precinct, in your town, and we can train you on how to do that. Look, one of the other things we do is we have an intermediate community organizer training. It takes place usually on a weekend over 20 hours. So we do 12 hours on Saturday, 8 on Sunday. It's very intensive. And if any of you are from a part of the country you'd like to invite us to come, again, we try to charge this. We don't really want to charge any money for this. We'd be happy to help you guys organize something like that in your community to get you guys trained. So, look, whether you are an activist and you want to get some free training online, we invite you. If you're a leader in your community, you want to bring us in to do intermediate community organizer training, we're happy to do that. If you want us to help you with data so you know the patriots who are moving into your community so they're incidentally unregistered, you get them registered and help them vote in one more election than they might otherwise, we could help you. And if you're a donor that says, look, I'm fed up with the way this country is going, I want to make a tax-deductible, non-disclosed contribution, and I want it to be spent turning out voters here, and I don't want anybody to know that I did this. I'm your guy. Look Ahead America is at your service. So that's my personal cell phone number. That's a QR code with my info, and that's my email address. I think you guys have been great. Again, all my thanks to Turning Point, to Charlie, to Tyler who helped set this up. I'm very grateful to all of that. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to take them, but as I end all my speeches, America first, America forever.